Last year, in collaboration with International Flavors and Fragrances, we created a new scent work titled A Large Piece of Turf. Referencing the title of Albrecht Dürer's famously expressive botanical watercolor from 1503, the work points to the landscape and nature as containers of arcane information, and the olfactory as a form of access key to approach them. A nondescript industrial diffuser emits an earthy and sweet fragrance into the exhibition space. A smell we refer to as synthetic petrichor is meant to mimic the chemical exchange between rainwater and dry soil. Information is literally emitted and transferred to the body as scent molecules, rising from an immaterial undergrowth. Smell stimuli, it's been shown, registers close to the hippocampus in the brain and is particularly effective in evoking distant memories.
The lower bound of a landscape is constituted by the earth. Under the same field at which I find myself looking lies a sullen but sustaining earth, a vast layer of materiality composed of soil, stone, and rock that is, in its own way, as capacious as the sky. But where the sky is eminently visible and the horizon coyly demi-visible, the earth withdraws from sight at every remove. Only the outer surface of the topsoil gives itself to me as a manifest presence. It takes rare glimpses of its upturned depths, excavated earth, cliffs striated with sedimentary deposits, to sense what lies below the surface.
Soil, as the upper layer of the earth, could be compared to skin, insofar as it is porous and vulnerable in both directions, a permeable membrane that consists of a mixture of clay, rock particles, organic remains of plants and animals. The soil is also a harbinger of multiple fictions, stories to be retold and futures to be inhabited. The smell of wet soil is known to stimulate a visceral response in people. The odor derived from oils exuded by plants during dry periods is absorbed by clay-based soils and rocks. During rain, the oil is released into the air, along with another compound called geosmin, a metabolic byproduct of actinobacteria, which is emitted by wet soil, producing a distinctive and easily recognizable scent.
Petrichor, deriving from Greek with the meaning of a stone liquid which flows in the veins of gods, is the molecular moment of the landscape entering the breathing body. Its release into the air ensues rainfall following a drought. In our work, the landscapes are inhabited with a multiplicity of nature spirits, returning, crawling back from beneath the surface, from the earth, chewing onto the contemporary ecological anxieties. Horror, and folk horror in particular, provides us with an ecological worldview in which human and nature, human and non-human, are thoroughly imbricated, always on the verge of becoming other.
wretched our ground. All leveled, all vanished, all settled, contaminated, eroded, drained, exploded.
In a narrative of perpetual return played out between the undead body and the landscape, malevolent spirits inhabiting Eastern European bogs, such as Topielet or Rusałka, revealed that the past was never actually past at all. The dead, drowned, burned, and buried alive, they have always lived, in the spill, in the landscape, and in folk horror. Many of the Slavic and Baltic nature spirits are often believed to dwell in natural terrestrial boundaries, especially those delineating the threshold between the human and the natural, field borders, gullies, forest edges, swamps, whirlpools. In fact, the 17th and 18th century Russian historical records that describe both demons and spirits of vernacular belief who lived in the liminalities of nature placed a special ban on prayers performed to demons near wells, rivers, and copses, near barns, washing houses, and other transitional places.
Baltic legend tell us about the large stones with shallow crannies and foot-shaped crevices in their surface. Rainwater collected in these vessels would attain magical properties. It is almost up to this day women coming back home from work would stop by these rocks to wash their hands and faces and to heal from diseases.
Rise from the dark soul. What legs pull me can I use to lift myself? Huh? Or what arms to lean up on? Oh, my soul, my little heart. Make your fingernails into spades, your palms into shovels. Throw the soil onto one side and the slab to the other. Turn your hands into shovels. Dig yourself out. Return to me.
Amilcar Cabral says the conflict between lithos, rock, and utmost climate is due to the antagonism between rock and climate. If we admitted the existence of intention in natural phenomena, we could argue that this opposition demands that the rock transforms itself in order to subsist. Neither the rock disappears completely, nor the climate ceases to operate. Rather, the rock gets integrated into a new form of negation of existence. This observation, intention, and natural phenomena can be read as an urge to allow for a kind of rock agency. In staying with the trouble, making kin in the Cthulhu scene, Donna Haraway thinks through the demon familiar spider Pimoa Cthulhu, writing, I work with string figures as a theoretical trope, a way to think with, a host of companions in symbiotic threading, felting, tangling, tracking, and sorting. I work with and in SF, that is, science fiction, speculative fabulation, string figures, speculative feminism, science facts, so far, as material semiotic composting, as theory in the mud, as model. But what if the mud does not stop flowing, leaks in its permanence through all the crevices?
Suicide, burned body. Katharina, wife of Jean Coblin, Seigneurie of Egremont, Val d'Ormont, burned. Summi von Rechthalten, burned. Greta Büsen, Magd von Summi, from Rechthalten, burned.
Let me share this story for those of you who have not heard it before. Once upon a time there was a child who was willful and would not do as her mother wished. For this reason, God had no pleasure in her and let her become ill, and no doctor could do her any good. And in a short time, she lay on her deathbed. When she had been lowered into her grave, and earth was spread over her, all at once her arm came out again and stretched upwards. And when they had put it in and spread fresh earth over it, it was all to no purpose, for the arm always came out again. Then the mother herself was obliged to go to the grave and strike the arm with a rod. And when she had done that, he was drawn in.
Burnt alive.
And then at last,
Jacqueline
the child
Grimond,
had
daughter
rest beneath
from
the
Echarlin,
ground.
beheaded at a young age. Jacques Grimond, son from Echarlin, released. François Sautier, decapitated, burned. Génaud Bardet, beheaded,
He
burned.
came up in a story
Suzanne
of
Monin,
violence. The
banned.
striking arm of
Jean
the
Duprat,
story.
old Catholic
The
man,
arm comes alive
bottoms,
after death.
decapitated.
The arm is
Jean
alive
Germain
after
from La
death.
Tour de Trême,
Before the
sliced
grim
head,
ending,
the
arm
body
is held
thrown into the
in a moment of
flames.
suspension. The arm becomes, despite the morbid nature of this story, a signifier of hope. The arm is suspension, is still rising. Even after the willful child had been brought down, something, some spark, some kind of energy persists. There is agency where we thought there was none.
In The Art of Living on a Damaged Planet, Niels Boban describes the eruption of Sidoarjo mud volcano, informally called Lucy, that erupted in Indonesia in 2006, shortly after the company, PT Lapindo Brantas Incorporation, had begun exploratory drilling for gas in a late Miocene stratum, 2,800 meters below the surface of the Earth. The toxic mud continues on leaking after the first humanly made volcanic eruption in planetary history. The 2012 movie, Hantu Lumpur Lapindo, The Ghost of the Lapindo Mud, is based on the narrative of these tragic events. An example of film mystique, a popular movie genre that combines soft eroticism with horror stories, featuring the many varieties of spirits and ghosts in the Indonesian mystical universe. Hantu Lumpur Lapindo is the story of a striptease dancer who is murdered by a gang of organ thieves after they have removed her heart. The gang dumps her body in the Lapindo mud, but the ghost rises, smeared in mud, to haunt the gang and kill its members one by one. In the movie, mud is the spiritual index of vengeance against capitalist mark, personal greed, and social betrayal. Until recently, the notion that humans could have an impact on the tectonics of the earth itself was laughable. Not so anymore. Industrially produced tectonics have become an increasingly recognized risk, since fracking and high-pressure injection wells have been shown to generate an increase in earthquake activity.
Throw the soil into one side, the slag to the other. Oh Mariola, turn your hands into shovels, dig yourself out, return to me. series of catastrophic loss characterized by extreme frenzied yearning for power. Every year, the people of Epirus in northern Greece hold the Panegyria, a multi-day music-intensive events in which they mourn their losses and celebrate what remains. Panegyria are religious festivals in that they are tied to the patron saint of the village church and are held on the day dedicated to honoring the life of that saint as determined by the Greek Orthodox calendar. There is speculation that the Panegyria have taken roots and that the priests simply assimilated them. Regardless, Panegyria have always aimed to treat Xenitia with a hefty dose of Parea, a company of friends. Panegyria are a way for the village to pay homage not just to its saints, but also to its missing, those who left, those who are otherwise exiled, and then exult in the remaining togetherness, however fleeting it may be.
In Eastern European rural tradition, on Thursdays, or most notably on October 31st, the ancestral ghost or Zadi would pay the living a visit. In preparation, the bathhouse was heated. The number of chairs, shirts, and towels set in a bathhouse equaled the number of invited souls. After bathing, feasting took place. An equivalent number of table settings was to be laid out. The foods would be dark in color and aromatic. They were to resemble the soil. Even babies were kept awake. The presence of death was immediately announced to all domestic animals. Bees were informed by a rhythmic knock on the hive. Attentiveness was endorsed. Silence ruled the house. Doors and windows remained open. Additional food was left at the crossroads and was handed out to the poorer members of society, as that simultaneously meant a poor person, leaving only little linguistic disjunction between being ancestor or family and being poor.
Our video piece in production, Mouthless Part 2, is a 20-minute musical score woven with stagings of this particular scene in artificial landscapes. With it, we are thinking through ecofeminist theory, queer ecology, recalling Eastern European rituals connected to mourning, death, and the threshold. As the protagonist of the video, we place the folkloric undead beings. The script and choreography of the piece, basing on the traditional polyphonic singing of Lithuania, speak both of the historical redefinition of the relation of the individual and the land and the contemporary complexity of the overhanging ecological drama. Weirdness that inhabits human and non-human bodies as it does the environment imbricates us in complex relations that reveal our mutual desire for co-constitution.
Hoi valgon Psie do Hui laistu Chokop Luilu Luili Luilu Hai Revele Belefies Illa Pejnava Illa Belevel, ja, uliulul, illul, uliul, o koch tusialiu, o dod, eisbel, bnoglavio, stagdlavi, stagiot, Bebolksie, benijavas, besniova, pestami, stengdius, belcie fila, besnivia, illa, bellevel, illa. Go, knagno, snogdo, ogjufok, iktagdop, opopop, ežbižjal, znevaga, nezlotjo, taktitju, anjevot, plagasa, ebnia golevo, abeni magdusella, eniva shegdivio, pelevel, jagdi, ujdizima, prosper, estigda vognen jagdo, igdano, agdo, ždimanje ždela.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eglė and Dorota. That was lovely, a hypnotic ending. Really enjoyed that. Shall we open it up to questions? Anyone?
Yeah, thank you very much to everyone. We really welcome questions also. If you had any ideas or
feedback. Hello? Okay. While you guys gather for yourself for a moment, I'll ask a question. I wanted to know about the sounds that we were listening to, especially towards the end, and also when you were showing documentation of the exhibition. I was curious what the origin of the sounds were and how you either made or found these recordings.
So all the material that we played is part of our work, and then the recent series that we were speaking is called Mouthless. So it's like a last year of work, basically. And all the music was made specifically for this project also. So one of the soundtrack that you hear was made in collaboration with sound producer Bill Kuligas. He's Greek. So somehow, like, we found a lot of like moments that we can relate to, like looking, let's say, in the specific Laman song tradition, let's say, that we talked about. And the second, and the other soundtrack that's more like a song, it was inspired by Lithuanian folk song. Sutartinės is polyphonic singing that's kind of like very present in the south of Lithuania, and still like kind of performed by mainly women. So inspired by these songs, we wrote a soundtrack for the Mouthless Part 2 that's still to come, and few parts, and especially and the last one is part of this soundtrack. Do you want to add something?
You guys raise your hands, I can bring the mic.
Yeah.
Hi. Hello. This is really interesting performance to me because I'm also Eastern European, and it was really interesting for me to hear about all these, folk and shamanism, which is something that is close to my country as well. I'm wondering, did you have? You picked this theme to explore. Is it something that you had direct contact with, or what made you interested in, specifically shamanism, for example? Or was it just something that was also within the context of your current work?
I guess we have this kind of long-standing research into vernacular beliefs, but also like the kind of horrific, let's say, aspects of it. So the monstrosity in this belief as well. We were really interested in kind of exploring the different demons and nature spirits as a kind of type of interface that mediates between people and their environment. So I think this research is really strictly connected to the landscape and different understandings of landscape. So I think this is why we went this direction, and Eastern Europe is really rich in these things, and they are still very much present there, despite of the organized religious beliefs. These things like still somehow have their place in language and in tradition and customs, things like that. So I think this is why we wanted to work with these things. And then there's also like very specific rituals that we like to use as a methodology for performances. So it's like the spirit conjuring rituals. Specifically maybe this one called Jade, which Eglė was reading about earlier. And we kind of use this method of conjuring for like bringing up maybe certain histories that are a little bit maybe not unwritten because they are written, but they're kind of filed away in archives, but not maybe spoken about as much. So this is specifically the European witch hunt, which the first part of the series, Mouthless Part 1, specifically refers to.
Yeah, and I guess like these old beliefs for us are interesting also in a way like of like maybe potential for relating to the land in a different way, I guess, like with the ecological anxiety in the back of your mind, like one looks back and forwards to different ways to relate, and these beliefs, like they are kind of most present and prevalent, like in the society, like pre-capitalistic society, and something that like can maybe offer alternatives of thinking. So just looking back, yeah.
Hi. I wanted to just go back to some of the earlier pieces that you showed at the beginning of your presentation with the landscape. You were talking about the kind of olfactory component to the work. So there's this there's a sensory aspect to the work. And I just wanted to know how you connect those two things. One, which is this very kind of optically focused, let's say manipulation of the landscape, and how that makes a connection to these fragrances, the kind of olfactory component, because we have two very kind of distinct sensory things happening, and how do they relate to the work, which appears to be a little like so, a bit more optically focused.
Mouthless Part 1 has just been completed last year in October. It's always shown with the fragrance, with the petrichor fragrance that we developed with International Flavors and Fragrances. So it has this material dimension in this way. I guess like in our work, like we think a lot about like different ways to of relating to art rather than like smell, sound, just because we come from a lot of reading into feminist and queer theory, so we're always thinking about somehow playing with the boundaries of sensations, like visual, like haptic or smell. So we don't want to make hierarchies between this, so trying to include all the senses.
And then for us, there's also something that's really interesting about smell, is that it's this sense that really kind of lacks its specific language in a way, or its language is not as developed as the other senses, I think. So in a way, it kind of really allows for a different reading of a work that would employ it, I think. And the direct relationship between these images that you're seeing now and the smell, which is also present in the space. I don't know if you can smell it still, but I think it was here when you entered. We kind of see a very strong relationship between them, because the smell that is diffused is the smell of petrichor, but it's not the natural smell of soil. It's a synthetic replica of the smell. And we kind of really like this in opposition to these images, which are kind of hyper-real, beautiful landscapes that are ever morphing, but they're also artificially produced by an algorithm. So we kind of like to maybe point to these two things as like how our understanding of nature is formed historically, also through art, through painting, through landscape painting, through the framing, through the technology that mediates it also. So I think that's the connection we see as well. And also thinking again about the molecular in the technology that surrounds us, like the invisible, and the kind of depth that's of infiltration of these things that like there is potential of.
Yeah, and I guess both positive potential, but also some sinister potential that maybe we can think of right now, in the contemporary also. like, I don't know, in terms of molecular colonialism, like molecular surveillance, like policing of bodies. So in this way, I think it just helps us to bring this to mind. I have the conversation about this, about an artwork that you can't escape. If you're in the space, like you have it in your body. You can't stop it. Yeah, so I think that's what's interesting to us also.
Very simple question. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future?
Very optimistic, within reason. Yeah. What are you thinking?
So no. I don't know. Fluctuates, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine a world in 10 years' time or in 20 years' time?
No, but I guess like in recent days we noticed like a lot with the artists like this, because there was a lot of like dystopian kind of tropes in art like carrying through, and then I think artists are realizing that one has to be like a creator, like creative agent within this system right now. That's kind of like terrifying in many ways. So like one wants to be more constructive and like think of not only of dystopian futures, but also like alternative futures. And I guess like, I mean, we like horror as an aesthetic and horror like as a way of questioning these boundaries and just understanding the fear which is like really present, let's say in Europe, Eastern Europe, with increasing nationalism and further on. But we don't think it's necessarily dark in that way that is pessimistic. It's just something that like a tool to go through something, to think through something, and then maybe arrive towards something also. Yeah. Maybe like that.
No, I mean, I guess, I mean, the question is a ridiculous question, of course, but I think I think it's important because, I mean, Gerhard Richter says, you know, art is the highest form of hope, which is, you know, it's a very like boomer, it seems to me now like a very kind of overly neat boomer formulation about the relationship between art and hope or something, right? Like, I can't buy into that at all. But I'm sort of, I mean, I'm genuinely interested in how every generation feels about the future, right? And feels about, because obviously in very empirical, metricized ways, a human future or a livable future is being kind of, has an expiry date that seems to come closer and closer to us. So there's a way in which our hope, our hope now can be measured against something very tangible and tactile even, right? So there are dates about 2030, there are dates, et cetera, you know. And so, you know, in a sense, it's the luxury of the previous generations, right, who in a way are on their way out, who may not be around in 10, 20, 30 years, to still talk about hope maybe, or to outsource their hope to Greta Thunberg or to 12-year-olds or something like that, you know. But then at the same time, that 12-year-old may read the scientific literature which says that there's basically only 12 years left, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So I guess, I mean, I think it's, yeah, so it's I think it's, I mean, I battle with it myself because I'm naturally pessimistic, but at the same time, if one adopts the position of pessimism, nothing could ever change, right? It's a defeatist position at the same time. So, I mean, how much do you think what you do has the potential to elicit change in the outlook of others, and is that something important to you?
I guess it's important to have a conversation also, and it's like, I guess art is a way to have this conversation also. It opens these kind of entrances.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously it's not measurable and it's not direct, right? But like so much of our present has been created by works of art as well, you know. So the dystopia that we're in now, and this like place that seems without hope, it's also, you know, it's also like a pre-written thing that is somehow actualizing now. Or so in a sense, I think it's a privileged position to just allow this no hope kind of situation and just run with it rather than try for like another narrative, which I think there is so many that really haven't happened yet, you know, and there's just so many more voices now that we haven't heard before. And even just the example of Eastern Europe or Poland in particular, where I'm from, I mean, it's a really dark time, but it's a really hopeful time simultaneously. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you can see a queer future, a feminist future, really feel these vibes, I think, in Eastern Europe and not just Poland as well.
Yeah. I guess this thing that losing hope is a privilege that like maybe majority of the people can't afford, and then like minorities can't afford. So I think, yeah, basically.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's interesting this is happening on Easter as well, these sort of, when we evoke these sort of histories in a way. I was really drawn to some of the works and also some of the songs, and I'd love to know more about them. And also, I mean, the reason I mentioned Easter is because whether it was the goddess Ishtar or Easter, but also there's this word called Pisacha in Sanskrit, and the burning of Holika, happening around the same time in different parts of the world, and they all have somehow these histories of the burning of witches or the burning of a demoness in a way, and these relationships that you sort of grow up with in terms of like stories and histories, they're somehow not just let's say from a particular region, they're shared across different parts of the world. And so thank you for that. There's this one particular work that I saw in the exhibition. There was these two sort of what looked like sculptures made out of was it branches of wood with a song. Could you tell me a little bit more about that work?
About this song, I guess we can say about this, like, is it that?
This one, yeah.
Yes, this is our exhibition at Trafo Gallery in Hungary. The work, like these two sculptures, and there was other sculptures. I start from the sculptures. The sculptures are called hexanol, like referring to the molecule of grass, and at the same time of rotting books is the same molecule that represents this feeling. And these sculptures also have like a very strong presence in smell, like when you're there, and like it also like the first way for people to relate to them, and like through memory. And people always talk to us about like their childhood when they meet us, like in that context. And I don't know, we created these sculptures reading a lot like Silvia Federici, for example, and just thinking about like the agricultural society and like pre-capitalistic society, but also referencing maybe like the witch burning sites.
I mean, this form is like a replica of what is traditionally used for hay gathering in Eastern Europe. It's just that we make one material change, and this is that we use kind of polished steel to form the structure around, and a very sharp edge as well, just kind of trying to maybe point to something that is threatening also in this very familiar form. This also the impressions that you get is usually of comfort, and then there is something also discomforting in it. So yeah.
They reminded me a little bit of the work of Ana Lupaș, the Romanian sculptor who had worked with, I guess, rural artisans and the kind of local sculptures that were made in the fields.
Yeah, I guess we like this displacement also. There's something like not like taken out, but also made somehow like distant, also made some threatening in some way. Like, I mean, when you're present there, like the top is very sharp, and like you get this feeling like of uneasiness also. And then there is a sound piece that that comes through 5 public address speakers, and then this is the song that you heard. Like, it's Lithuanian folk song, and references specific plant, ruta, which rue, sorry, Lithuanian. And this plant is like, it was very significant to women in the society. It would be like, it would appear in women's gardens throughout history. I mean, it had like medicinal function as a abortive or contraceptive, and this is the song, like taking this rue as a name, as a character. Yeah.
But also like overlaying the song several times, so then this kind of like knowledge, like this oral tradition somehow being blurred out as well. And kind of, just becomes like a droning sound nearly.
I don't know enough about this, but I was told that Lithuanian is I guess one of the oldest languages, and shares, I guess, roots with many other modern languages. And I wonder when this is heard elsewhere, if there's this kind of recognition through those sounds.
I guess it comes actually from Sanskrit, from that. So I guess that there's also like a lot, not through with language and tradition, and like I guess there's a lot of connections. But like also when you start researching more and more, you find so much parallels also, like in the early belief also, like from East also, like to Greece, etc. So somehow, like one then understand more these connections, interhuman connections also, and like the complexity of relation, and kind of like, I don't know, also also at the same time, like the difficulty of borders and boundaries that like we face now. So, yeah.
Could I ask a question about the work that you made here? The I want to say spirit catchers, but ghost catchers.
These it's like new sculptures created here in Dubai with a local workshop. This architectural modeling company, and we created these 3 small-scale sculptures that are take the shape, like the architectural shape of Lithuanian traditional structures called stogastulpiai. They would appear on the crossroads originally. It would be 2 or 3 meters high, carved in wood, and it's a very old structure dating from pagan times. And I think now we created them in this kind of contemporary shiny materials, replicating, let's say, solar panels, street walks, etc. But what is interesting for us in that structure is the changing histories, the changing meanings that it contains. In the pagan times, it used to be a ghost feeder, like where the food that you would leave, like for the dead souls, like putting food quite high. But then, with the introduction of Christianity, that was quite brutal in the area, like in 1300, these structures like in these structures, the Jesus and Virgin Mary sculptures were placed, and like it was reappropriated for like the Christian kind of religion. And then as time transitioned into the Soviet Union, where religion was prohibited, these sculptures took again like a decorative purpose, like a purpose of craft. Suns were placed into them. And I think, like, for us, interesting to think about, like, arts and maybe folk arts, but also arts as kind of maybe tools that others use, like for like nation building or like national identity building, but like when its meaning is not originally created for that purpose, but also appropriated at the same time. And I guess one thinks about their own art, but also just, yeah, like change, like manipulation within history, I guess, through this, I think. Questions, comments?
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
And I just want to say with this, the spring residency comes to a close, and it's been amazing having you here, and we're very sad to see you go.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions.
Thank you.